We're doing a special podcast today about Thanksgiving.
And he's doing this because he called me at the last damn minute, the
Well,
last minute,
Time Traveler
and I
has
have nothing. So,
he has a lifetime of stories. He's not thankful for anything, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm doing this podcast for my grandchildren because they'll probably never meet their great grandfather, who's 94 years old. And my dad and I had a very difficult relationship. Emmeline and Abishai, your grandfather and great grandfather had a very difficult relationship. But I always remembered something that he did for another man that not only saved him, but saved his marriage. Let me tell you how this thing worked out. We had a neighbor, the Warrens. They were extremely artistic. I used to love going over his house when we ever went there because he did paintings of his wife. He did sculpture. He made his own furniture. He dabbled in polishing stones. In fact, he gave me this bolo when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and he made it. So I was inspired by this man because he was retired, but he was extremely artistic and just had an amazing sense of curiosity. But he had another love beside his wife, and that was whiskey, alcohol. He was a serious alcoholic. In our day, we would call him a drunk, a filthy drunk. And there were times where they would visit. They were about two houses down, so they're very close neighbors. And they would argue. The wife would argue about his drinking. And I don't know how my dad made friends with him, but they were close. So I remember this vividly. One morning, there was a knock on our side door, and there was Mrs. Warren, and she goes, "Pancho, that Emmeline and Abishai, that was your great grandfather's name, Pancho. That's why they call me Don Panchito. I'm never going to be called Pancho with my relatives." So she goes, you're going to have to find Jim. He's on a bender right now. I have no idea where he is. He's been drinking all night, and he's gone. And he hasn't been home in, I don't know, 24 hours or such. And I need you to go find him. I don't know if he's dead. I don't know if he's passed out on a street. I don't know if he's in jail. But can you please go find him? And my dad got in his truck. My dad had this old GMC truck. Loved that truck, classic truck. I went out to go find him. Several hours later, he returned with Jim, who he had found at Barnes Park, which is a park in Monterey. How he found him there or why he went there, to this day I don't know. My dad's 94, and I think I'll ask him. He might remember of why he ended up there. He may have talked about that as being one of his favorite drinking spots. Anyway, he found Jim there, brought him home, and he sobered up. That was literally the last time Jim drank. I guess maybe his wife said he was going to leave him. I don't know what was said between the two. I was too young. I was about 10 or 11, so this made a big impression on me. And as we celebrate this time of Thanksgiving, there's less and less gratitude and thanks in the world. Most of us have become entitled, spoiled. We just take our country for granted. We take our parents for granted. We take food on the table for granted. We take for granted the fact that bombs aren't dropping on top of us. So I experienced firsthand the gratitude of a man who got saved from himself, and essentially his marriage was saved as a result of the action my dad had made on behalf of his wife. And so yearly, monthly, the Warrens would always bring over some food or something to give to my dad and give to our family. They gave us, we were fairly poor, so they gave us their old couch, which compared to our couch was like brand new. Jim had made this beautiful tile table, and he gave us that, and I loved that thing. It was just so artistic. It kind of had a very Southwestern design. He gave us that as well as other things, but always showed up around Thanksgiving time to give my parents something. And I was always impressed by his gratitude and his thanksgiving for what my dad had done. And as bad as our relationship was, I've always put that on the plus side of that selfless action my dad took in order to find this man. He could have said, "I'm too tired. It's too early. It's a Saturday. I want to spend time with my family." No, he got in the car and went out and found Jim. And I wanted to tell you that story because there are actions that happen through life that we not only take for granted, but we don't take the time to say thank you and show gratitude to that person who either showed mercy on us, disciplined us, guided us, mentored us, and essentially saved us from ourselves, gave us a vision so that our life would go better. And my dad gave me a vision of how to be selfless and how to help somebody in need. And I hope I could, at some point, also do the same if somebody ever required that of me. But more than that was just, in fact, there's a story like that in the Bible of the man who was healed by leprosy. I can't remember the number. Let's say there were 12, but one came back to thank Jesus, and he was extremely thankful. And Jesus asked, "Where are the others?" So being thankful and having gratitude is a very rare thing, and it's much needed today because we're all so self-centered and focused on all our problems without seeing the big picture. Anyway, this particular message goes out to my grandchildren who maybe you might be able to meet your great-grandfather, even though he's housebound, but he did a great thing. You got anything?
You know, it's a funny thing you should ask because, like I said, you just called me this morning or yesterday it was, and we got to talk. We're going to do this thing early. And it's odd, you know, when you're pushed into doing something like you just did.
Should bring out the best in you.
Anyway, I wrote a column this week, and what I put in there was
My wife said it was your best.
Well, thank her for that. I appreciate people saying that.
And I was amazed that you wrote about it. So go ahead.
Yeah, it is kind of.
Because I said, he wrote about that? And she said, yeah. I said, wow, that's a breakthrough. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's you know.
Because I've asked you to write about that in the past.
Yeah, but I just touched on it. I just called it a tragedy. I didn't go into detail.
Oh, so you still haven't addressed it. Okay.
Now, well, I've addressed it with my own world. Anyway, but the thing is, I've got a whole lifetime full of, I mentioned the column, loves, lost loves, all the things that I've gone through in the last 76 years, whatever it is. A lot of stuff. And it's this guy at Save Mart. He came up to where in the grocery line, and he looked over at me, and he says, "Hey, how you doing, old timer?" And I looked at him. This guy's about 60 or 65, and I says, "You're calling me an old timer?" But then I realized he's right. So I went home, and I was going to write some stuff about what I could pass on to anybody else behind me. So I sat down to write.
With your number 2 pencil.
With my number 2 Ticonderoga pencil, yes. Anyway, yeah, this wasn't for Jana. This column would never go anywhere. She's the one that does the work for me, does the real work. The
typing.
Commas, yeah, and put in the syllables and commas. Yeah, different. You know, the problem is I don't really know how to write. Not really. When people.
Oh, you're a good writer.
Well, when people read, I've been told this before. When people read the column, they're not reading something. If somebody writes something, they're hearing me talk. And so I just talk whatever I'm talking. I've already lost my train of thought. But nonetheless, I sit down there at my desk, and I'm going to write about all the wisdom that I have. And I thought for a second. I said, good. Well, hell, I have gone through a whole lifetime of falling down, getting up, triumphs, failures. I don't know zip, nada, zero, zilch. I didn't know what to write about. But it's all out there. You just, you got to think about it. It's there. But at any rate, I don't have a fuzzy warm. I've never been known to have the milk of human kindness, so I don't really have, I don't have.
You don't have a story about thankfulness?
Easter, Thanksgiving. But how about this?
I'm not saying about Thanksgiving in terms
being thankful
of a day being thankful and gratitude, because
gratitude
is. I mean, look at what the World War II generation gave us. I mean, we could have all been doing Zig Heil, right? And we're the recipients of Western civilization. Running water, we expect running water, we expect electricity. You grew up without electricity, but everybody just expects it. We got paved roads, we have planes and trains
But we
that run
don't.
on
But
time.
we
Go to Europe, all that
what's
stuff.
happened is we've gotten soft.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so I thought I would relay this story. It has to do with accidentally helping somebody. Years ago, I had a 5 or 6 or 7 man crew, and Friday it was, and here they come all these young kids, just 18, 19, 20 years old, and their shoelaces are not tied. They're sloughing down the hallway to get their paycheck. Their shirts are untucked. And I looked at them and I said, "Hey, you guys, look at yourself. Look at yourself. You represent me when you're out there. You're running around like a bunch of slobs. Have you ever seen me with my shirt untucked? No, no shirt untucked. I expect you to go out. I want you guys to be crisp. Crisp. You understand me? Crisp." Then I paid them. And then they went out and got drunk. But I mean, that's just, it was okay because they were 19 or 20. But anyway, 3 or 4 or 5 years later, I'm walking down the Galleria in Roseville. I'm walking with my then daughter-in-law, and we're going down the Galleria, and we're, Galleria's got these little kiosks everywhere. And we're walking, and this kid way behind me, he says, "Hey, John, I'm crisp. I'm crisp." And I'm looking at my daughter-in-law, and I said, who the hell is that kid? Good God, keep moving, keep moving, don't look back. He said, "No, I'm crisp." I looked back, it was one of those kids. He's got a tie. He's got a white shirt. He is crisp.
Went corporate.
So yeah, he did, and he was doing rather well for himself. And so what the point is, sometimes we help people and we don't even know we're helping people.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
so I'm very thankful that I was able to help that little much, and I hope he quit drinking.
And with that, wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, but more than just one day, develop a heart of gratitude for all the good things that have fallen on you, that happened to you. And it's a good thing to that person who's, especially teachers out there, educators, a good neighbor. Say, hey, thanks for being a good neighbor. Because I've been around some neighbors that make your life a hell. So having a good neighbor.
Wait a minute, I'm not done yet. Go ahead.
Oh,
No,
you're not
finish
done?
that thought. We got a couple of minutes?
Tell them thank you. Go for it.
You know what? I am actually thankful for something.
Okay, what?
I grew up in an area that was very rural, really rural. The nearest neighbor was 7, 8 miles away. We didn't have electricity. We there was nobody around, and when I stop and think about that, people look at my life and they say, "God, you were deprived. I mean, you didn't have anything." Well, I got news. I had one. We've talked about this before. We had one of the greatest childhood. I had the greatest childhood you could possibly imagine, but there was differences because since we didn't have electricity, means that we were reading with coal oil lamps. We didn't have any of the nice things that people have today, which they don't appreciate, by the way. But one thing I did have is I did have a father, and since we didn't have electricity, he would read to me every night, and I would sit there on the bed, with my hands folded, listening to these stories, and he would read. He wouldn't read things to me that I would, like little kids. He wouldn't read Tony Wants a Pony, and he read to me good stuff. I mean, stuff that he would want to read, like To Kill a Mockingbird, which I think was already out by then, but books of that order, or Of Mice and Men. I did the same thing with my kids. Or The Last of the Mohicans. And the beauty of this was that since I didn't have any other imaginary things to go with, I became Chingachgook, the last of the Mohicans. And since we hadn't anything else around here, I got up in the morning, and we were way out in the country, and I had my Indian outfit. My mother made me an Indian outfit, and it consisted of a belt that she shortened down and fit around my waist, and 2 pink washcloths. We didn't have any money. 2 pink washcloths, and I would hang them on a nail at night, and in the morning I'd put my little Indian outfit on. No shoes, no nothing, and I spent the entire day working through the forest, fighting off Frenchmen, bad Frenchmen, and everybody else that were part of that book, The Last of the Mohicans. And I gotta give it to my dad and my mom. They gave me, even though we didn't have anything, the perfect childhood. I got to play and be anything I wanted to be, and like I say, for 2 or 3 years I was Shingachgook, the last of the noble savages. So yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm thankful for that. Okay, you got something thankful now? You happy with
We'll
that?
see you around the corner.
Okay.